Today we're going to be practicing some different watercolor techniques. So as we go through these, I'm going to have you work along with me at your table. You might notice that I have some masking tape on there, so that's actually a technique in and of itself. You can use masking tape in order to separate different areas of your watercolor if you're working with watercolor. So that's the first thing, is we're going to add our masking tape, so I'm going to give you a second to do that. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start working in our different sections. So I have 2, 4, 6, 7 different techniques, plus masking, that I want to show you today. Some of these are probably a review for you, and some of them might seem new. We're going to go ahead and work on wet on dry first. I put that in kind of one of my smaller sections down here, or up here, just so that, I don't know, it's pretty simple. I didn't want to take up too much space with that. So my masking tape goes off the side. I'm going to use that to my advantage. I've got a water cup off to the side here, so I'm just going to make sure I get plenty of water on my brush. Since it is watercolor paint, we want to make sure we're using a lot of water. We need to add that water so that our paint is nice and wet instead of being kind of sticky and clumpy. If you notice that your paper and your paint is really shiny, that means you don't have enough water. You need to add more. So we need to go ahead and kind of get our paint ready. I'm going to add just enough water to create kind of like a little pool inside each of my wells of paint. If you know you're only going to be using a few colors, you might not do this, but I'm going to go ahead, get all of them ready to go. I can't just dip it into the next color. Remember, I got to make sure I clean my brush out and get more paint. This one looks like it's pretty low, but there's just enough on the side that we can kind of scrape. Watercolor paint doesn't really become paint until we add that water. So at first it's just pure pigment or color, and so I don't need a whole lot to get started. I've got red on my brush. I'm going to go ahead and do that for wet on dry, and basically wet refers to the paint, dry refers to the paper, so I'm just going to go ahead and I can just paint directly on there however I want to. I like to work across instead of just kind of painting it random, especially if I'm working in a section like this. So I'm just going to keep going across. You can kind of pull some of that other paint across with you. Unfortunately, we're not using watercolor paper, so your paper might bend a little bit, and the paint might kind of bleed or go in directions that you don't want it to, but that's okay. So there we go, wet on dry. I've got a wash all the way across. If I wanted to make sections lighter, I would simply just add more water to those areas and kind of spread the pigment out a little bit more. If I want to make it darker, I need less water, so I could like dry my brush off, get some more paint on there, and then you can notice it's a little bit darker in that center section through here. Okay, so that's wet on dry. Now I'm going to move over to wet on wet. So I'm going to just paint the whole section with only water to start with. And we want to make sure we get a lot of water in there. Then we're going to get whatever color we want and then just kind of dot it onto that space. And notice how it starts to spread on its own. So you can just dot it, or you can actually kind of paint it and create like a whole wash. I could get other colors going here too. I'm going to try red with my blue, see if I can get some purple going. Okay, same thing, I can dot it, or I can actually force it to kind of spread around. So this is a cool way to get kind of like a tie-dye effect if you want to. We're going to go with salt next. So I'm going to do, you can go wet on wet or wet on dry. Doesn't matter, and you don't even have to fill the whole section. Just as much of it as you want to, but make sure it's nice and wet. If it's too dry, this one's not going to work, because we're going to be taking some salt. I should have pre-opened this beforehand. I'm going to use my Graffito tool. Oh man. Alright, there we go. I'm going to get a little salt in my hand. And this one you're going to kind of have to come back to see what it actually looks like. But that salt is going to start to absorb some of the paint right away. And then once my paper is dry, I can just wipe that salt off, and you'll see it's going to create some really cool texture kind of on there. So there's salt. The next one we can do is Graffito, so I already kind of mentioned that one. So I'm just going to take this And I'm going to add some designs and just kind of rough the paper up. Don't try to scratch all the way through the paper. Okay, I think I'll use purple this time, so I'm going to get that. And especially if I would have created, here I'll do like a K, oops. If you create like a design, it's going to start to show up. And of course I put too much paint on there. Okay, so you can see whatever lines that you ended up creating with your needle tool. I don't use this technique very often, but it's kind of fun, so I wanted to teach it to you. The next one we'll do over here is wax resist. So again, we're using, this one you probably remember, we're going to use an oil pastel, or you could use a crayon, but you're just going to create some sort of design. And then we're going to paint over it. I haven't used orange yet, so I'll use some orange. So we're going to paint over it, and notice anywhere that you had oil pastel, we're going to resist. It's going to push away the paint, and you're going to only be able to see the paint in those spaces. You won't be able to see, or you'll only be able to see the oil pastel in those spaces. You won't see paint. Okay, so there's that one. We'll do the marker one next. So this one I'm actually just going to take like a water-based marker. And I'm just going to kind of scribble on here. Just water this time. And notice how we can turn a water-based marker into watercolor paint. Okay, that's all there is to that one. And then the last one, gradation, so, or value, I guess you could say. So you can either use one color and have it like blend from like a darker version to a lighter version, or you could start a color at the top and at the bottom and blend them. So remember when we talked about analogous colors, colors that are by each other on the color wheel, those are the colors that we would want to use. So like I know yellow and green, oops, I don't have enough water on there. Notice how shiny it is. Yellow and green are by each other on the color wheel, so I'm going to start with yellow at the bottom, and I can do green at the top. Okay, and we're just going to start bringing them towards each other. And this time I'm just doing water, and I'm just trying to spread that down. If I don't have enough pigment, I could always add some more yellow here, and then just kind of pull it towards the green. Okay. And do the same with the green. Start with some more green and bring it down towards the yellow. And then we should start to get a little bit of overlapping, so I might bring some green into the yellow. We're starting to get some lime there. And then same thing, bring some of the yellow into the green, and vice versa. And we should kind of get a bit of a gradation from the green into the yellow with some yellow green in between. So those are the 7 techniques that I want you to know and practice today. You can start to see my salt just kind of starting to pick up some of that water. So that'll be really fun next time when we come to class to kind of scrape that off and see what everything looks like dry.